Well, Peter ordained pastors. Yes, I'm sure you ordained pastors afterwards, after you ordained as well. But of course, you officiated weddings, as you mentioned. What were you supporting, Mary, at the time?
I worked with the women in the local church. We were doing church work at the local church, at the branch level, at the district level, and at the regional level. So I was involved with the women's meetings at all those levels. Now, in getting to know the women, I was aware that the Kipsigis families were very large, 8 children, 10, sometimes even 12 children. And I thought this was their culture, that they wanted to have many children. And I mean, we were supportive of the culture of our people. But as I got to know the younger women, they told me that they really did not want to have children born close together. Now, there were government dispensaries and mission hospitals that offered birth control methods, so I encouraged the women to take advantage of them. But the women had many reasons why they didn't want to use the birth control methods that were available in the dispensaries. Sometimes it was because their husbands wouldn't use them, but mostly it was because they were aware of medical problems that women that they knew had when they were using them. Now, I'm discussing these things with the women, and their husbands, who were also my very good friends, they accused me of westernizing their wives. When Peter and I went to Kipsigis, the church had already been established about 40 years earlier. There were a lot of British people around on the farms and in the tea plantations and other foreigners. A lot of westernizing had already taken place. So sometimes I was confused of what was Kalenjin culture, what was New Kalenjin culture, and what was Western Kalenjin culture. So I kind of, in my discussions with the husbands, I reasoned with the husbands that maybe because this was such a felt need of the younger women, that maybe in this area it might not be bad to be a little bit Western. Now, on that note, as I got to know the older women, the ones who had 8 or 10 children, they taught me about the culture that they had grown up in. I was working with the church women who had changed somewhat, but they taught me about the culture that they had grown up in. And I learned that the Kalenjin people had actually had a very strict fertility management system that required them to space their children about 4 years apart. Now, this was a big space. And as I got to know the people, I realized that the great grandmothers, the really older people, had not had 8, 10 children. They had maybe four children or 5 children. Anyway, they had this strict method of fertility management that required them to space their children a lot, very well. Now, this method was rigidly administered by the whole community. So I'm learning a lot of new things. After a child was born, part of the communal celebration was that his mother's head was shaved ceremoniously, and she was clothed with a leather girdle. Now, I learned that the leather girdle was actually a chastity belt. The couple was not allowed to have intercourse until that child fulfilled 3 criteria. Number 1, the child had to be approximately as tall as the chastity belt his mother wore was long. So during that time, as the child was growing, the women were not fasting, they were not slimming, they were getting fat. So the chastity belt got bigger and bigger. So the child had to be fairly tall. Now, that was the first requirement. Number two, the child had to be able to run fast and long for long periods of time, so that if wild animals or raiders threatened, a pregnant woman wouldn't have to pick up her child and run with that child, putting three people in danger: herself, the unborn child, and the toddler. So those were two criteria. The third criteria, the child had to be able to follow instructions to catch one of the communal goats and take it to his father, who would be some distance away. This indicated that the child was able to contribute to the ongoing welfare of the community. And this was amazing to me. Now, but the next part, it was even more amazing. If a man impregnated his wife, after the child fulfilled the criteria, there was another communal celebration. The woman's head was shaved again, and the chastity belt was removed. And then the couple could go on with their sexual relations. Now, if a man, this is the really amazing part that was amazing to me, if a man impregnated his wife before the child fulfilled these criteria, he was very heavily fined. The man was fined. Number one, he lost his job as a warrior. If a man could not be self-controlled in the sexual area, he had shown that he couldn't be depended on in a battle if his life depended on it. Was he going to have self-control there? Nobody wanted him as part of their group. So that was number one. He lost his job as a warrior. Number two, his age mate slaughtered one of his cows and feasted on that cow without letting him join the feast. So that was a heavy, heavy fine, the second one. And the third one, I think, was the most, not harmful, but the hardest one. He lost his voice in the community. He had shown that he didn't respect the community, that somebody else was probably, the community could manage a child by maybe another couple, and he had taken their time. So he would never be allowed to address a baraza. So this was 3 very serious fines. So I'm thinking these young men who are accusing me of westernizing their women, their wives, had already been westernized by not following those criteria. Anyway, but still, the women, we were having discussions, but still the women were not very happy with the methods of spacing children that were available, because this method had sort of gone down the tubes before and could not be revived. So, but they weren't happy with the modern methods of family planning. So eventually I learned about the ovulation method of fertility management that teaches women how to read their own bodies so that they would know when they would be able to conceive. This method required the couple to be abstinent from sexual intercourse for the few days that they were fertile during each month. Now, this method was somewhat compatible with the traditional method of fertility management, which required abstinence from intercourse over a number of years. So as I taught my friends this method, many of them were happy to use it. And over the years, teaching the ovulation method of fertility management took up more and more of my time. But I was still involved in other areas, areas that Peter was also involved with and that I was involved with. But that was one of the most interesting parts of my involvement.
That's very interesting. You will be surprised to learn that you have actually taught me things that I didn't know, and yet I come to Kipsigis.
Really?